Greetings, my name is Kerry and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a recent reads video for you. It's been a busy old month. I've had a few essays to write, that sort of thing. So I've actually finished 11 books since I last filmed a recent reads video. Rather, I think, than talking about all 11 in one go, I think I'm probably going to split this into two videos. After I've got through the first 5, we'll see how long it is. And yeah, probably it will be 2 videos, just so I can have a bit more time talking about the books and it will be a bit easier to edit and people are more likely to watch it because it won't be as long, hopefully. So that's the idea. So I think I'm going to talk about 5 books in this video and then I'm going to do another one with 6 books in. I'm going to mention now, because I am notoriously bad at doing it as I go through. I'm not great at remembering what all the content warnings I want to give for books are. If you check out my Instagram, where I have done mini reviews for all of these books, I will highlight some of the content warnings there. But what I also do on these recent reads videos is I link in the description box to the book trigger warnings website. So any content warnings for any of these books, if you want to check that they're safe for you, I won't necessarily mention them in the video unless they've really stuck in my head, but they will be listed on that website if there are ones. Some of the books that are ones I've read for uni probably won't have links because A, they're non-fiction and are less likely to need them, and B, you're less likely to read them because they're to do with theology. So if there's any book that I haven't put a content warning link for and you want to double check, then do let me know and I will try and remember for you. Anyway, all of that by way of introduction. I'm going to be talking about, I think, 5 books in this video, so I'm just going to get going. The first book I'm going to talk about today is A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. So this was our Space Science Book Club book, I think, for February. I didn't manage to finish it in time, but I did finish it. I have finished it now, obviously. I have got a book diary for this, which probably will already be published before this recent reads, but I'm not definitely sure. So if it is, I will link that for you in the description box. I will also link the Space Sirens live show for this book where they talked about it. I wasn't part of that because I hadn't finished the book in time. So I'm not going to go into loads of detail now because that book diary shares a lot of my thoughts and it's either already available for you to watch or will be very soon. So keep an eye out for that one. Just very briefly, this is science fiction. It is about an ambassador from a small mining colony who are at risk of being overtaken by a larger empire next door in space. So she's the ambassador to the empire and she's appointed at very short notice because her predecessor has died suddenly and somewhat suspiciously. So she has to go and she has to try and find out what happened to him. There was a lot that I really loved about this book. I realised that characters being incredibly out of their depth is something that I really like, and not knowing who they can trust, with a couple of caveats on that, which I will talk more about a little bit later in one of the books. But I think in this book, certainly, Mahit, the ambassador, she learns very quickly and adapts really quickly to the different situations, compared with the other book where the characters were definitely out of their depth, which I'll get to in a minute, where they didn't ever seem to learn. Anyway, or at least one of them. I'll talk about that more in a few books' time. A little bit of intrigue there. You'll have to wait and see what I'm talking about. Yeah, so I loved this. There was a lot of political intrigue, a lot of back and forth, didn't know who she could trust. She had to try and figure that out, try and figure out what happened to her predecessor and how to protect the interests of her colony. Really, really loved this. The second book is out now, A Desolation Called Peace. I have it on reserve from the library, so hopefully we'll be getting to that before too much longer. But if you want to know more of my thoughts, check out that book diary. The next book I finished was A Kind of Spark by Al McNichol. I read this in one sitting. After reading A Memory Called Empire, which was very heavy, I just needed something that was going to be quite light and quite easy to read. This is a middle grade book. It is written by Al McNichol, who is autistic, and the central character, Addie, is also autistic, as is one of her sisters, and so it explores how her mind works differently to those of her peers. It focuses a lot on her experience of school and a teacher that doesn't understand her and is a bit of a bully and not a very nice person. One of her school friends has made a new friend who is also not very nice to Addie, but there's a new girl in the school who is really keen to be friends with Addie and to learn more about how autism affects her. So that was a really lovely setup. Addie learns in school about the witch trials that happened all over the UK in like the the 16th, 17th century, and she's really fascinated by them because she realises that actually a lot of the women that were killed in these witch trials were possibly quite like her. They just weren't really understood by society, they were slightly outcasted, they had maybe slightly misunderstood behaviours and that sort of thing, and so she feels a lot of empathy for them. I thought this was really, really beautiful. I picked this as my favourite book I read in April. I really, really loved it and I really highly recommend it. It is middle grade, but it covers a lot of difficult topics and it covers them really, really well, and is really good, I think, for starting conversations with children and young people about neurodivergence and how different doesn't mean bad, and how we can all be a lot more open and inclusive towards each other and care about each other. Yeah, so that was really good. I really enjoyed it. The next book that I finished, and I'm actually getting through these quite quickly. The next book that I finished was Out of the Silent Planet by C.S. Lewis. This is the first book in the Space Trilogy, and I picked this up for the Space Trilogy read-along hosted by Victoria from A Musical Bookworm. I will try and remember to link to the live show for this that she hosted because it was really good, really delved into some of the themes of the book really well. I didn't know a lot about what this book was about, but I really enjoyed it. So this was written in the 1930s, before we knew a lot of what we now know about our solar system. So in this book, the main character, Dr. Ransom, is kidnapped and taken to Mars, which is called Malacandria in the book, and there he meets representatives of various different species that live on the planet, and they're all equally intelligent, but in slightly different ways. And so the whole way through he's trying to work out who's in charge here, but actually all of the species are equal. The silent planet of the title refers to our own planet, and there's kind of this cosmic battle going on. Each planet is governed by the Eldil, who are kind of mysterious beings that you can't really see. They live on like a different plane of existence, and the one that governs Earth is Bent, so he's bad, he's evil. Ransom is learning a lot about our own civilization from his encounters with this other civilization, which is really cool, and that's, I think, good sci-fi does that. So I've actually also finished the second book now. I'm going to be talking about that, I think, in the next video. But this was a really good introduction to the series, and I'm really glad I finally got around to picking it up because these have been on my radar for a long time. This is my dad's copy. I do have my own copies, but they're in storage somewhere. I've had them for quite a while and never quite got around to them. Someone mentioned to me, or a couple of people have mentioned, that the second book in the series they'd found quite sexist, and I will talk a little bit more about that when I talk about that book, but that was one of the reasons I put off reading the series, because I was worried about reading that second one. So I'm really glad that Victoria hosted this read-along because it actually pushed me to pick this book up, and I really enjoyed this one. I think I gave this one 4 stars. I can't remember if I said I gave A Memory Called Empire 4 stars and I gave A Kind of Spark 5 stars. I really enjoyed this, really glad to have started this series, and hopefully we'll be finishing it soon. I've just got one more book to go, so looking forward to finishing this series finally and to having these books off the TBR. I'm not really sure what else to say about it. I will link that live show as I mentioned, so you can go and check that out if you would like to know more. The next book that I finished was called Models of the Church by Avery Dulles. I'm not quite sure how you say his surname. This was one I picked up for uni, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot. This I was reading for my ecclesiology class, which was to do with the study of the church. I've been working through it for a little while and I just finally finished it, and it's essentially about how different people, different denominations, different church groups understand what the worldwide church is and how it is structured and what it means, and so he explores different themes about that. He was a Catholic cardinal, so it is written quite from a Catholic perspective, but he does cover kind of Protestant denominations. It was quite dense in places, but actually generally quite readable, and it really helped me formulate some of my understanding for the essay I was writing for that class, so I quite enjoyed it and I gave it 4 stars, and I'm not going to say anything more than that about it really. And then the 5th book that I'm going to talk about in this video is A Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir, which is the 3rd book in the Ember in the Ashes series. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about this book particularly because it is the 3rd one in the series, but I'll tell you a little bit about the series as a whole and about the 1st book. So this series is set in a fantasy world that is largely based on ancient Roman society. There's a ruling class of people called the marshals, and then there's various other people groups. So there's the scholars who are an oppressed class, and I think they're loosely based on the Greek peoples who were overtaken by the Romans, if I remember my ancient European history correctly. And there's also the tribal peoples, and then there's the mariners who are a seagoing society. In the first book, there are several central characters, several narrative perspectives. So in the first book, I think it's only 2 of them, and then in the later books she adds some more. I can't remember exactly. But the 2 main characters in the first book are Laia and Elias. Laia is a scholar girl. Her brother has been captured by the marshals for learning to forge weapons and has been taken to impenetrable prison. And so she teams up with the Scholar Resistance because they said they will help her free him if she can infiltrate the Black Cliff Academy, which is where the elite soldiers of the marshals are trained. These soldiers are called masks because they wear a mask that kind of melds to their face, and so she agrees that she will infiltrate this academy in exchange for help to free her brother. The other central character, Elias, is training at this academy, but he is pretty uncomfortable with a lot of things that he has to do as a mask, is not entirely comfortable with that lifestyle and is kind of looking for ways to escape from that. He and 3 other students are put into competition to discover who is going to be the next emperor and who is going to be the second in command, who is called the Bloodshrike, who basically does the dirty work for the emperor. They have to go through a series of trials, and within that environment he and Lion meet and realise that in some ways their interests align, and the story kind of builds from there. So the second book builds on some of those themes, adds a third perspective character who is Helen, who is a friend of Elias from the academy, and how her life has changed after these trials. She was one of the other students in the trials. And then the third book adds a 4th perspective, but it's only a minor perspective, who is the Nightbringer. So there's this underlying stuff that I didn't really pay enough attention to in the first book about why the scholar class are oppressed. So they, in the past, they had gone up against the Jinn and had stolen their power and trapped them in this forest. So the Nightbringer was the king of the Jinn, and he is trying to free his people and wage a war against the scholar class, who are already really oppressed anyway. His perspective is added into the third book, just little pockets of it. I understood why that was necessary for the point of view of the narrative, to understand his motivations and how he fitted into the story. Didn't particularly like his perspective. One of the other perspective characters, Len, I don't like her. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail because I don't want to give away too many spoilers, but I mentioned with A Memory Called Empire, I quite liked that Mahit, the central character in that, was out of her depth entirely and didn't know who she could trust. And those are a couple of tropes that I really liked. Now, actually, Helen in some ways is quite similar, and particularly by the third book, she is definitely out of her depth and she definitely doesn't know who she can trust. However, the difference in the characters is that Mahit learns very quickly, learns from her mistakes, and adapts to the role that she's in. Whereas what I found really frustrating in this book, and I wasn't enjoying for most of it, is that Helen just never seems to learn, and she just makes the same mistakes over and over again, and I just wanted to shake her because I was like, why haven't you realised yet? And again, I realised that those were all narrative plot points that led to the end of the book and what happened at the end, which leads into the final book, which I'm hoping to read soon, but it just really frustrated me. Hopefully that's not been too spoilery. If you've read this book and you agree with me, do let me know, because I'm interested to hear what other people think of her as a character. I just found her more and more frustrating as the book went on. So I really struggled with kind of the first half of the book. I didn't love that it kept switching between all of these different perspectives when I really just wanted Laia and Elias's perspectives again. I like the trope of the main characters being separated and you don't know if they're going to be able to come back together and help each other. So that did happen, and the climax of the book was pretty good and really did draw me in, and I am quite excited to read the final one. So I gave this one, on Goodreads I've given it 4 stars. It was more a 3.5 star. The ending really did raise it for me, so I have slightly upped it on that. But yeah, I didn't enjoy it, I think, quite as much as the first 2, and so I'm going to be really interested to see how the final book turns out, as to whether this is going to be a series that I will end up buying and rereading, or whether it's just one that I'm going to say I'm happy that I got them out from the library but I'm not going to reread them. We will see how that book turns out, because at the moment I've read them all from the library, which is why I don't have this one. I've just taken it back. So I think, looking at the timer, that I'm going to stop there. I'm just going to leave it at those 5 books for this video, and I'm going to do another one talking about the next 6 books, because I don't want this to be massively long, because editing Kerry will not thank me for that. Let me know if you've read any of these books and what you thought of them. Do go and check out the Memory Called Empire book diary and live show, which will be linked below for you. Yeah, let me know some of what you've been reading recently and what you've been enjoying. If you've got any recommendations of books with characters that are out of their depth, then do let me know, because I really like that trope apparently. But yeah, just let me know some of what you've been reading. If you just want to let me know that you've been here but don't have anything that you really want to say, then leave me some kind of sci-fi related emoji, because I've talked about a couple of sci-fi books today, so anything that you think would fit into a sci-fi novel, leave me emoji of that. But I think that's it for today. You can also like this video if you liked it and subscribe if you haven't already, and you can also follow me on my social media. All that information will be listed for you in the description box below. But that's it for today, so thank you so much for watching and I will talk to you again soon. Bye!